Good afternoon. I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News, coming to you from our digital desk. You may have seen bird flu while you're scrolling through social media. It's making headlines mainly because of how widespread it is with livestock and poultry. And that's where it stands pretty much at that point. So we know you may have questions about it. The CDC just dedicated another $93 million to closely track bird flu in and around the country. They have a website that tracks cases. There have only been 3 cases. And in fact, I want to scroll to the top of this page. When you look at the current summary, it is the CDC currently diagnosed or has a threat level is extremely low for human spread. There have only been 3 cases. There were 2 that's in April and May. Those both occurred with people who were working on a dairy farm. And then you have 1 case from a poultry farm in Texas. Those 3 cases amounted to roughly just pink eye. You can see where this is impacting wild birds, the amount of detected cases in wild birds and poultry, almost 93 million birds. We're talking chicken, can be chicken and turkeys, what have you, in 48 states. Then dairy cows, 67 herds have tested positive in 9 states. And yes, Ohio is one of them, along with Michigan, North Carolina, Texas, and I believe Iowa, just to name a few. We're going to bring in our infectious disease expert that we have leaned on so heavily in the past few years. Unfortunately, we have needed this kind of expert, Dr. Amy Edwards with University Hospitals. Dr. Edwards, how are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Thanks for joining us. Let's get to this. The CDC threat level low. If they had a lower designation, it may even be lower than that. What do you think people should know when they hear the term bird flu?
Well, bird flu is influenza in birds. So influenza is not isolated to humans. Influenza viruses can infect pigs. It can infect birds, bats, all sorts of different species. And in this case, this particular one, this influenza derived from an avian strain. There has been some human crossover, like you mentioned, but there's not been any human-to-human spread, and that's key, right? So it is people who have been exposed to infected animals as opposed to humans who are passing it from human to human, which is why the current threat level is low. Now, I would like to point out that while the risk to humans from infection is low, the economic impact, particularly for the farmers and the people who are raising this livestock, can be devastating. But the risk of infection of a large-scale outbreak is low. The concern, and this particular strain of avian flu has been around for several years now. The concern, in light of what we all just witnessed in 2020 with COVID, is that we know that viruses can jump species. And in fact, this one has. For instance, there have now been cases reported in alpacas and some other animals. And the question is, if it were to jump species to humans and start to spread in humans, what would the impact of that be? And in fact, that's been something that we've been worried about for a while. There is actually, believe it or not, already a vaccine stockpile for the strain of flu in the federal government vaccine stockpile. But it is something that we all watch closely.
The interesting thing about its H5N1 bird flu is, as you mentioned, it's been around for a long time. We're talking 10, maybe even 20 years, and it hasn't made this jump. Is there anything to suggest that as it keeps spreading to different animals, different livestock, does it somehow make it easier to jump to humans, or what is the connection, or do we know?
Well, the truth of the matter is just time makes it easier, right? So every time a virus comes in contact with a new species, that's an opportunity for random mutation to allow for it to jump, right? I mean, humans can get exposed to bacteria and viruses from other species all the time. We have animals that live in our home, right? We go backpacking in the wild, things like that. It's whether or not it's capable of making that jump. And every time there's a connection point and you allow it to try to make the jump, it's all down to statistics, right? If you only make contact with that virus once, statistically speaking, it's unlikely that it's going to jump. But because this virus spreads so much in animals that humans have close contact with, we are constantly giving it the chance to jump. And I will point out that the overall mortality rate in humans who have gotten bird flu from animals is about 50%. Now, in recent years, what we've seen is very little mortality in humans, indicating perhaps this strain, the variation of this strain may not be as severe in humans. But there were very significant concerns that if it did make that jump, the mortality rate could be extremely high, which is why we've always been very cautious about this virus. That's why there are already vaccine stockpiles. And so it's not something where you can say, oh, well, if it hasn't jumped in 20 years, it's not going to. That's not true at all. Every time the virus contacts a new species, it's still got the same chance of jumping that it had every other time it did it. And so it's just all about statistics. I guess the best way to think about it would be if you bought one lottery ticket, what are your chances of winning? But if you bought 1 million lottery tickets, it's still true that each ticket is very unlikely to win, but overall you've increased your chances. I don't know, does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, you've increased your opportunity to be exposed, sort of idea. Right. Completely understand that. You were talking earlier about how devastating this can be for farmers, especially when it comes to poultry. They generally have to destroy the entire population of bird, and people are asking, well, how does it get in from one farm to the next? A farmer can track it in on their boots. Birds can fly in and unfortunately leave bird droppings. I mean, this can spread very rapidly. That's why for farmers, this is such a concern when they go from feeding their cows to go into the chicken house or whatever you call it. There is a very good chance to spread this. That's why you said it can be devastating. Dr. Edwards, as we always do, let's leave you with the final word. No one is waving a red flag here. This is still a precautionary. Let's know what we know. Let's figure out what we can. How do you want people to walk away from this conversation? What should they be feeling at this point about bird flu?
I think at this point, I would say that this is one of many viruses or other types of infections that public health officials and infectious disease physicians monitor on an ongoing basis. There's no particular reason to be concerned right now from a public health standpoint. Obviously, from an economic and agricultural standpoint, that's different. And this is your public health system at work. I mean, these are the kinds of things that the CDC should be tracking because, while it hasn't jumped yet, if it did, we want to be prepared. We want to be ready. And in fact, they've even been monitoring vaccine efficacy as the strain has been evolving. There's been some pushes to update the vaccine so it matches it better, for instance, and so they're actually working to update it this year. So this is literally what public health is. This is what we do. Obviously, you guys got an up close and personal view of that back in 2020 and all through the whole COVID pandemic. But we do this all the time. The goal is for these viruses never to jump or for us to catch them early and to prevent further spread or, whatever. But this is what they do. It's nothing to be panicked about. It's nothing to be concerned about at this time. And with their ongoing monitoring, if we start to see human to human spread or anything becomes concerning, then obviously the CDC and those of us who follow these sorts of things will let the public know.
Dr. Amy Edwards, an infectious disease researcher expert for the University Hospitals. You are a wealth of information, and I love that comment about this is what public health does. This is the behind the scenes stuff, looking at all these different kind of viruses that could impact the public so that we're ahead of it instead of behind it. Of course, when we see COVID, that's something brand new. That's a little tougher, but this is a situation they've been following for decades now. And it appears we are ahead of it. Dr. Edwards, thank you so much for your time. We truly appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Have a great day.
All right, take care. Again, this is just a what do you need to know. You keep seeing headlines about bird flu, H5N1, and we like to bring you the experts like Dr. Amy Edwards with University Hospitals. Our 3.5 hours of news and weather starts in just a couple of minutes on Channel 19. We will see you over there. Otherwise, if there's breaking news, it'll be here on our digital platforms. Until then, I'm Dan DeRose with 19 News. Have a great afternoon.
19 News is everywhere. Download our CTV app.